My name is Ethan Cole, and until recently, I believed that danger only happened to people who invited it into their lives. I kept to myself, avoided unnecessary risks, and followed the same quiet routine every single day. Work, home, silence. That was my world. It was predictable, controlled, and safe, or at least that's what I thought before one ordinary evening turned into something I still can't fully explain. That night, I left the office later than usual, somewhere around 9:20 p.m. Most of the building was already empty, the lights dimmed in long, quiet hallways. My coworker, Daniel Harper, had asked me to grab a drink after work, but I declined without hesitation. Socializing always felt like an obligation rather than something I enjoyed, so I chose what I always chose, going home alone. As I sat behind the wheel of my car, I realized I hadn't eaten anything all day. The thought of cooking felt exhausting, and I didn't have the energy to deal with it. Instead, I decided to stop by Golden Walk, a small takeout place I had visited dozens of times before. It wasn't special, but it was reliable, and that familiarity was exactly what I needed after a long day. Golden Walk was nearly empty when I walked in, just like most nights at that hour. Mrs. Lynn stood behind the counter, giving me a brief nod of recognition before turning to prepare my usual order. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly above, casting uneven shadows across the walls. Everything about the place felt the same as always, which made what happened later feel even more unreal. When I stepped back outside, I noticed a blue sedan parked across the lot. It wasn't new or particularly noticeable, but something about it felt out of place. The engine was off, and the windows were dark, making it impossible to see inside. I paused for a second, then dismissed the thought as paranoia. There was no reason to assume anything was wrong at that point. I got into my car, placed the food on the passenger seat, and started the engine. The smell of warm food filled the air, briefly distracting me from everything else. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced once more in the rearview mirror. The blue sedan was still there, unmoving. At that moment, it didn't mean anything. I had no idea it would soon become impossible to ignore. At the first traffic light, I came to a stop and leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. The road was mostly empty, the street lights stretching into the distance. That's when I noticed headlights approaching from behind, pulling up beside me. I turned my head just enough to see that it was the same blue sedan from the parking lot. There were 4 people inside. The driver, Marcus Haley, leaned slightly toward the window, his expression fixed on me with a strange, almost amused look. In the back seat, Leo Grant and Trent Walker exchanged glances, while Kyle Reeves sat quietly, watching. None of them looked away when I noticed them. Instead, Marcus smiled, like he had been waiting for this moment. He said something loud enough to hear through the glass, something mocking and unnecessary. The others laughed, their voices overlapping in a way that felt rehearsed rather than spontaneous. It wasn't just random behavior, it felt directed, like I had somehow become the focus of their attention without understanding why or how it had happened. Without thinking, I responded with a short, sarcastic remark, hoping to end the interaction quickly. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted it. Marcus's smile didn't disappear, but it changed subtly in a way that made my chest tighten. The light turned green, and I drove forward, but something told me the situation wasn't over yet. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just an uncomfortable interaction that would end once we went our separate ways. But after making a turn onto a different street, I noticed the same headlights following behind me. I checked the mirror again, hoping I was mistaken, but there it was, the same blue sedan, maintaining distance, moving exactly as I did. I decided to test it. I made another turn, then another, choosing streets that didn't lead directly home. Each time, the car followed without hesitation. The realization settled in, slowly but heavily. They weren't just driving in the same direction. They were deliberately tracking me, matching every move I made without giving any sign of stopping. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as my mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe I was overreacting, but deep down I knew better. There was a pattern, a clear intention behind their movements. The way they kept their distance felt controlled, almost practiced, like they had done this before. I turned into a gas station, hoping the bright lights and open space would discourage them. For a moment I thought it worked, but then the sedan slowed, entered the lot and circled once, before stopping a few spaces away. Their headlights remained fixed on me, illuminating my car like I was on display. I stayed inside, pretending to check my phone, trying not to react. Minutes passed, but they didn't leave. No one got out of the car, they just waited, watching. The silence between us felt heavy, stretching longer than it should. I realized then that they weren't in a hurry, they were patient, and that made everything worse. Eventually, I started my engine again and pulled out of the station. Almost immediately, they followed. There was no longer any doubt in my mind. This wasn't random. It wasn't harmless. Whatever their intention was, it involved me, and I had unknowingly become part of something I didn't understand. My house was only a few minutes away, and in my growing panic, I made a decision I would later regret. Instead of driving somewhere public or calling for help, I headed straight home. All I wanted was to get inside, lock the door, and feel safe again, even though a part of me knew that might not be enough. When I pulled into my driveway, I moved quickly, grabbing my food and rushing toward the front door. The sedan slowed as it passed, continuing down the street without stopping. For a brief moment, I felt relief, convincing myself that they had lost interest and moved on. I wanted to believe it was over. Inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. The house felt the same as always, quiet, familiar, safe. I set the food down on the kitchen counter, but didn't open it. My appetite had completely disappeared, replaced by a lingering sense of unease that refused to fade. About 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of a car engine outside. It wasn't loud, but in the silence of the night, it stood out immediately. I froze, listening carefully as the engine idled for a moment before shutting off. Something about the timing felt wrong, like whatever had followed me hadn't gone far at all. I moved slowly toward the window, careful not to make any noise. Every step felt louder than it should have been. When I finally reached the edge of the curtain, I hesitated for a moment before pulling it back just enough to see outside. Across the street, under a dim streetlight, the blue sedan was parked, exactly where I feared it would be. The engine was off now, but the car sat there like it belonged. My pulse quickened as I watched, barely breathing. After a few seconds, the driver's door opened. Marcus stepped out first, his movements calm and unhurried. One by one, the others followed, Leo, Trent, and Kyle spreading out slightly as they stood beside the car. They weren't talking loudly or laughing anymore. The casual, mocking energy from earlier was gone. Instead, they stood in silence, all of them looking directly toward my house. The stillness of their posture made it clear this wasn't random behavior. It felt deliberate, focused, and far more serious than I had expected. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing through options. Calling the police seemed obvious, but I hesitated, trying to process what I would even say. Before I could decide, I heard something outside, footsteps on pavement, slow and measured, growing closer with each passing second. The first knock came without warning. It wasn't aggressive or loud, but controlled, almost polite. That somehow made it worse. I stayed completely still, hoping they might assume no one was home. The silence stretched for several seconds before another knock followed, slightly firmer this time. "Ethan," a voice called from the other side of the door. It was Marcus. Hearing my name made my chest tighten instantly. I had never told them who I was. There was no way they should have known. The realization sent a sharp wave of fear through me, far stronger than anything before. The door handle moved slightly, testing the lock. I felt my stomach drop as I realized in my panic earlier I might not have secured it properly. The faint click of pressure against the latch echoed through the hallway, louder than it should have been in the silence of the house. I backed away slowly, trying to keep my breathing under control. Another knock followed, this time accompanied by a softer voice. "We just want to talk." The tone didn't match the situation. It was too calm, too steady, as if they already knew how this would end. Then the handle turned again. This time the door shifted slightly inward with a quiet creak. The sound froze me in place. I didn't wait to see more. Instinct took over, and I turned, moving quickly toward the stairs, every step driven by rising panic. I rushed upstairs and locked myself inside my bedroom, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. For a moment I struggled to dial, my fingers refusing to cooperate. When I finally managed to call for help, my voice came out unsteady, barely holding together as I tried to explain that someone had followed me and now they were inside. From downstairs I heard the door open fully. The sound echoed through the house, followed by slow footsteps crossing the hallway. They weren't rushing or searching in panic. The pace was controlled, almost patient, like they already knew exactly where I was. That calmness made everything feel far more dangerous than if they had been loud or chaotic. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay completely silent. Every small movement felt amplified in the quiet. My breathing was uneven, and I had to force myself to slow it down. The operator on the phone was still speaking, asking questions, but I could barely focus on her words as the footsteps below continued. "Stay on the line," she repeated, her voice calm but distant in my ears. I whispered that they were inside, that there were 4 of them. Saying it out loud made it feel more real, more immediate. I realized how defenseless I was, trapped in a room with nothing but a locked door between me and them. One of them spoke from downstairs. "Leo," I recognized the voice. "Check upstairs." The casual tone sent a chill through me. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. They were working together, moving with purpose. This wasn't random intimidation. It felt planned, coordinated in a way that made it impossible to dismiss as impulsive behavior. The first step on the stairs was unmistakable. A slow creak, followed by another. Someone was coming up. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might give me away. I backed into the far corner of the room, gripping the phone tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. The footsteps continued, steady and unhurried, each one bringing them closer. I could hear faint whispers now, voices low enough that I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like they were communicating quietly, making sure not to reveal too much, even to me. The bedroom door handle moved suddenly, rattling once, then again. I froze completely, holding my breath. The pressure against the door was careful, testing. They weren't trying to break it down. They were checking, observing, deciding. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. I waited, unsure if they were still there or if they had stepped away. The uncertainty was worse than any noise. It forced me to imagine what they might be doing on the other side. Then, unexpectedly, the footsteps retreated. Slowly at first, then fading as they moved back toward the stairs. I didn't understand why. Nothing about their behavior suggested they would give up so easily. It felt wrong, like this pause was only part of something larger. A few moments later, I heard voices again downstairs, more urgent this time. The calm tone from before had shifted. Something had changed. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, I heard sirens approaching, growing louder with each passing second. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the silence that had filled the house just moments before. Downstairs, I heard hurried movement, footsteps, no longer slow or controlled, but quick and sharp. The shift in their behavior was immediate. Whatever calm confidence they had before was gone, replaced by urgency that confirmed exactly what I had feared. A voice, Marcus, spoke quickly, too low to fully understand, but the tone was clear. It wasn't panic, but it was close. Another voice responded, and then I heard the front door open again. The cold air rushing in carried faint sounds from outside, mixing with the tension inside the house in a way that felt surreal. I stayed where I was, not moving, not daring to make a sound. Even as they left, I couldn't bring myself to relax. My body remained locked in place, every muscle tense, waiting for the possibility that one of them might come back, or that this wasn't truly over. Car doors slammed outside, one after another. An engine started, then another. The sounds overlapped with the approaching sirens, creating a chaotic moment where everything seemed to happen at once. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise of the cars faded into the distance. The sirens continued, now much closer. Red and blue lights flashed faintly through the edges of the curtains, reflecting off the walls in brief, shifting patterns. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding my breath without noticing. For the first time since it started, the fear shifted slightly, making room for something else: relief. A loud knock came at the front door, followed by a voice announcing police presence. It took me a moment to react. My legs felt weak as I moved toward the bedroom door, unlocking it carefully. The house felt different, now emptier, but still heavy with everything that had just happened. I made my way downstairs slowly, half expecting to see something out of place, some sign they were still there. But the hallway was empty. The front door stood slightly open, just as I had heard earlier. The night air drifted inside, carrying with it the distant echo of retreating danger. When I opened the door fully, 2 officers stood outside, their expressions focused but calm. I tried to explain everything at once, my words coming out uneven and rushed. They listened carefully, then moved inside to check the house, their presence bringing a sense of structure to the chaos I had just experienced. They searched every room, every corner, but found nothing. No forced entry, no clear signs of damage beyond the unlocked door. One of them asked if I was sure about what happened. The question lingered longer than it should have, not because I doubted myself, but because I couldn't prove any of it. After they left, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same as before. It felt heavier, more aware. I locked every door and window, double-checking each one. Sleep didn't come that night. Every small sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed deeper than it should have been. The police left after taking my statement, but their questions stayed in my head long after the door closed behind them. They treated it like an unresolved disturbance, something unclear, but not fully criminal. I tried to accept that, but the memory of Marcus standing outside my house refused to fit into anything normal or explainable. I checked every lock twice before sitting down. My food was still untouched on the counter, now completely cold. I didn't feel hungry anymore. Instead, I felt a strange disconnect, like my home was the same place but no longer fully mine. Every object looked slightly different under the dim light, as if something had shifted while I wasn't paying attention. Hours passed, but I didn't sleep. Every sound outside made me sit up and listen. A passing car, wind against the window, even the house settling, all of it felt amplified. My mind kept replaying the same moments. The sedan, the silence before the knock, the way Marcus said my name like he already knew everything about me. At around 3 a.m., I finally sat on the floor instead of the bed, unable to stay still. I told myself it was over, that they were gone, that police involvement meant safety had returned. But logic didn't erase the feeling that something had been unfinished, like the situation had paused rather than ended. The next morning, daylight made everything seem less threatening. I went outside briefly, scanning the street. No blue sedan, no signs of anything unusual. The world looked normal again, almost aggressively normal, as if the previous night had been erased by sunlight rather than resolved. I tried returning to work 2 days later. Daniel noticed immediately that something was wrong, but I avoided explaining too much. Saying it out loud made it sound less real, and I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I just said I had a bad night and needed time to recover. Even so, I started noticing small habits forming. Checking reflections in windows, watching parked cars longer than necessary, listening for engines before stepping outside. I told myself it was temporary, a reaction to stress, but deep down I knew it had changed how I moved through the world. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer it, but the timing unsettled me. There was no message left, no follow-up, just silence. Still, I deleted the voicemail notification and avoided thinking about it, telling myself it was probably nothing. I never saw Marcus, Leo, Trent, or Kyle again. No reports, no follow-up incidents, no explanation. It was as if they had simply disappeared after that night. But absence didn't feel like resolution. It felt like distance, like whatever they were moved just far enough out of sight to remain possible. Now, when I drive at night, I still notice blue cars more than I should. Sometimes I slow down without realizing it, scanning windows for faces I hope I never see again. I don't know what that night was meant to be, but I know it changed how I understand silence and what it can hide when no one is looking.